Welcome back to Global Current Lens, where headlines are decoded, strategies are exposed, and the truth about global events comes into focus. Tonight, Paris, a city known for revolutions, protests, and political storms, in a stunning turn of events, France's new prime minister, Sébastien Lecornu, with some explanation, has resigned after less than a month in office. A moment that was supposed to signal stability for France has instead cracked open another era of uncertainty. What does this resignation mean for Emmanuel Macron's fragile presidency? How will it ripple across Europe and beyond? Explanation and what scenarios now lie ahead for one of the world's most influential democracies. Let's break it down. Quick context snapshot. France stands at a crossroads. President Emmanuel Macron, already weakened by political battles at home, faces a nation divided over pension reforms, immigration policy, and economic stagnation. His approval ratings hover at precarious lows, and his party has struggled to maintain a working majority in parliament. Against this backdrop, Macron appointed Sébastien Lecornu, a young rising figure seen as both loyal and pragmatic, as prime minister. The move was meant to project renewal, explanation, a reset button for Macron's leadership in the second half of his term. Yet less than a month later, Lecornu has stepped down, citing what insiders describe as untenable political pressures and fractured parliamentary cooperation. The resignation has shocked France, explanation, embarrassed the Élysée Palace, and raised urgent questions about the country's ability to govern itself effectively in turbulent times. With some explanation, the media event, the resignation of a prime minister, is always dramatic, but the speed of Lecornu's departure makes it extraordinary. He was sworn in amid cautious optimism, promising a government that would listen more, act faster. His agenda was ambitious yet modest, seeking consensus on housing policy, energy transition, and labor reforms. But from the start, cracks were visible. Parliament was hostile, opposition parties smelled weakness, and Macron's own coalition showed signs of internal dissent. Lecornu faced constant heckling in the National Assembly, where lawmakers blocked initiatives and staged walkouts. Outside the halls of power, strike and street protests escalated, portraying Lecornu as yet another technocrat unable to connect with ordinary citizens. Then came the decisive blow. Spinet reports that Macron's inner circle disagreed on strategy, undermining Lecornu's authority. Ministers aligned with rival factions resisted his proposals, while Macron himself reportedly micromanaged key decisions, leaving the prime minister sidelined. Explanation: sources close to Lecornu describe a man exhausted by the impossible in less than 4 weeks. He concluded that continuing would only damage France further. His resignation letter was brief and pointed. In the current circumstances, the conditions for effective governance are absent. For the good of the Republic, I step aside. The Élysée scrambled to project calm, insisting that a replacement would be announced quickly. Yet the symbolism is devastating. France, explanation at the heart of the European Union, is now without a prime minister during a moment of domestic and international tension. Explanation: historical and political context. To understand the weight of this resignation, we need to place it in France's political tradition. Explanation: the role of prime minister in the Fifth Republic is always delicate, powerful in theory, fragile in practice. France's semi-presidential system creates a constant tug of war between the president, who sets broad strategy, and the prime minister, day-to-day governance while commanding a majority in parliament. When harmony exists, the system works. When it fractures, paralysis follows. France has a long history of political volatility. Governments have fallen over budget disputes, ideological clashes, or sudden scandals. Yet rarely has a prime minister quit so quickly after appointment. It recalls the instability of the Fourth Republic in the 1950s, when frequent government collapses led to frustration and ultimately Charles de Gaulle's return to power. Emmanuel Macron, elected in 2017 as a centrist disruptor, promised to transcend left-right divides. His early years were marked by bold reforms, yellow vest protests, a populist uprising against fuel taxes and economic inequality. Since then, Macron has faced repeated challenges: the war in Ukraine and energy shocks. His second term, won in 2022, has been tougher still. Without an absolute majority in parliament, explanation: his government has relied on fragile alliances and controversial executive maneuvers, including the use of constitutional provisions to push through pension reforms. The resignation of Lecornu highlights the crumbling of this balancing act. It suggests not just a failure of one man, but a deeper erosion of governance under Macron. The president now risks being seen as isolated, unable to find partners capable of steering the ship of state. Explanation: global reactions. The international community has watched with a mix of surprise and concern. France is not just another European country. It is a nuclear power. Explanation: a permanent member of the UN Security Council and the EU's second-largest economy. Any hint of instability in Paris sends ripples across global institutions. In Brussels, European officials worry that France's absence of leadership could paralyze decision-making on critical issues: energy coordination, Ukraine aid, reform of EU fiscal rules. Germany, already facing its own economic slowdown, is uneasy about losing France as a reliable partner in steering the European project. Across the Channel, London newspapers describe the event as Macron's humiliation, noting how political chaos in Paris mirrors turmoil in Westminster's recent history. Tim Washington's part is watching closely. France has been a key partner in NATO operations from Eastern Europe to the Sahel. U.S. explanation: officials are concerned that a weakened French government may struggle to maintain commitments abroad. Meanwhile, Russia and China see opportunity. Moscow state media has portrayed the resignation as proof of Western decline, a Europe distracted and divided. Beijing, the nation locked in a strategic competition with Washington, views France's fragility as leverage in its diplomatic outreach to Europe. Even in Africa, explanation: where France's influence has waned after military coups in former colonies, leaders are noting Paris's distractions with a sense of quiet satisfaction. This is the global stage onto which Lecornu's resignation has exploded, a moment when domestic disarray becomes international vulnerability. Economic and strategic stakes: at the heart of the crisis lies the French economy, which has been sluggish and strained. Inflation has eroded household purchasing power. Industrial competitiveness faces pressure from both U.S. subsidies and Chinese overcapacity. Energy costs remain volatile despite some relief in gas prices, and unemployment among the youth continues to fuel discontent. Political paralysis only worsens these challenges. Without a strong government, reform bills stall. Nation, investors hesitate and confidence in the system erodes. Financial markets have already shown jitters, with French bond spreads widening slightly in the days following Lecornu's resignation. While not yet a full-blown crisis, the message is clear, carries a price tag. Strategically, France also risks losing momentum in global affairs. Explanation: Macron has positioned himself as Europe's voice of strategic autonomy, arguing that the EU should chart its own course independent of both Washington and Beijing. But such grand visions require credibility at home. A France mired in leadership turmoil struggles to convince allies abroad. Even security matters are affected. French troops remain deployed in Eastern Europe as part of NATO's deterrence posture. Paris also leads counter-terrorism partnerships in Africa. Recent setbacks: if Macron cannot stabilize his government, commitments abroad may weaken, leaving gaps others are eager to fill. In short, explanation: the resignation is not just about personalities. It threatens the machinery of the French state at a time when Europe needs resilience and direction. Possible futures: where does France go from here? 3 scenarios emerge, each with its own risks and implications. Scenario 1: de-escalation. Macron acts swiftly, nation, appointing a seasoned figure capable of restoring calm. This could be an elder statesman respected across party lines, someone with gravitas to command parliament and soothe markets. In this best-case outcome, the resignation becomes a blip rather than a turning point. Macron regains footing, Europe breathes easier, and France muddles forward. Scenario 2: limited conflict. Macron struggles to find a stable replacement. Explanation: successive prime ministers face the same hostile parliament and restless streets. Governance becomes piecemeal, with bills watered down or blocked outright. France avoids outright collapse, but the malaise deepens. Macron limps toward the end of his presidency, weakened, his ambitions curtailed, his authority diminished. Scenario 3: escalation. The crisis spirals. Macron, unable to form a workable government, dissolves parliament and calls snap elections. The gamble backfires, and opposition forces, perhaps the far-right national rally or a left-wing coalition, emerge strengthened. France enters a new era of political confrontation, with Macron sidelined. The EU faces a core member state locked in internal strife, shaking confidence across the continent. Which scenario prevails will depend on the next weeks. The choice of a successor, the tone of public protest, explanation. and the response of opposition parties will shape whether this resignation is contained or whether it detonates the French political system. Explanation, tension peak, and big question. So here we are, a French prime minister gone after less than a month, a president weakened, a nation divided, and Europe holding its breath. This is more than a resignation. It is a mirror reflecting the fragility of modern democracies, where polarization and distrust make stable governance harder and harder to achieve. The big question now: can France, a country that has weathered revolutions, wars, and crises, summon the resilience to steady itself once more? Or are we witnessing the unraveling of a political order at the very heart of Europe? Explanation: the world is watching Paris, waiting for the next move. Will a new leader bring calm, or will Macron's presidency sink further into paralysis? And what happens in France does not stay in France. The consequences ripple outward to Brussels, to Washington, to Moscow, and beyond. As always, Explanation will continue decoding the headlines and exposing the strategies shaping our world. If you found this analysis insightful, stay tuned, subscribe, and join us here at Global Current Lens as we track the next chapter in this unfolding story.